All right, I feel like this is a very Isla Vista thing to be doing right now. I'm eating a co-op wrap. It's making me think of when we would meet in person. Kirsten, I love the cool clouds you have in the background.
Oh, I was just gonna change it. This is my happy place. This is me swimming, looking up at the pool at Los Baños.
Very nice.
So I'm gonna change my background just a minute, be more professional.
Okay, okay. Okay, we've got 7 p.m. here.
All right, we can admit people.
Sounds good.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Ethan. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll give it just a moment and then we'll get started. Okay, it's 7 p.m. and I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Isla Vista Community Services District. I'd like to announce the meeting is being recorded. And before we go to roll call today, I would like to take this moment to offer a moment of silence for the victims of 2 tragedies that we are upon the anniversary of. First, 7 years ago to the date on Sunday, we lost 7 lives in Isla Vista due to a brutal act of gun violence and hatred. And it forever affected our community. And 1 year ago today, we lost George Floyd, who was murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis. And given these tragedies, I just want to start off with a moment of silence. Our thoughts, prayers, and our love is with the victims and their families. All right, thank you, everyone. Now we're gonna call the meeting to order, and Jonathan, can you do a roll call?
Yes, Director Brandt,
Here.
Director Bertrand,
Here.
Director Flaherty,
Here.
Director Freeman,
Here.
Director Aguilar. Don't think he's here. Oh, you're here. Great. And Director Deschler,
Here.
Director Geis.
Here.
All right. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anasqueo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. First on our agenda is the consent agenda. Do any directors have items they wish to pull?
Just one note, there's a typo. It's the May 11th meeting that we're approving, not May 25th.
Okay, and so do we want to trail that to the next meeting to agendize that correctly?
Oh, no. It's linked correctly. It's just labeled wrong. I think it should be okay. It's the correct minutes linked.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda with the correction of the title of 2.1 to reflect the May 11th meeting.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Bertrand, seconded by Flaherty. Any public comment or board discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Okay, Director Brandt,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Deschler,
Yes.
Bertrand,
Yes.
Geis, Aguilar,
Guys, yes. Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Now we're going to move to the public comment period. So this is the time where any member of the public is welcome to speak on any item that is not on our agenda today. If you have comments related to items that are on our agenda, we do ask that you hold those until that item, and we will open public comment then. You can hit the raise hand button, or you can put something in the chat if you would like to make a comment. Okay, I see a hand from Carmen. Go ahead, Carmen.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to be in touch again. I'm inquiring about what the district has done regarding the George Floyd murder a year ago. You may recall I requested that you all paint the iconic mural of him that's seen all around the country on the side of the community center. And I've never heard any response to that. Also, I remember that you put $5,000 in the budget for a mural, not particularly that one, but for murals in town. And I've never heard anything that came as a result of that. So can you fill me in on those 2 points?
Jonathan, do you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah, well, the community center has not been under our jurisdiction since November of 2020. So we haven't taken any action regarding the community center since it's we don't have a lease there right now. And it's being used as a temporary shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And the public art budget, we did discuss it yesterday at our finance committee. So there's a good discussion about it there. And it's a fund for opportunities. So we haven't actively pursued any. We've kind of had it as what comes to us that is proposed, but we talked about a different way going forward. And that can be viewed at the finance committee meeting on the IV as a City YouTube page.
So you don't have jurisdiction over the community center, and therefore you can't consider painting a mural on it? Is that what you're saying, Jonathan?
I think maybe this is too much discussion, but it's not something our board doesn't have jurisdiction on the building, and we haven't taken action on it since November.
Okay, thank you. And golly, I've had long hair in my days, but maybe not as long as yours. Looks good.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Carmen. Are there any other comments from members of the public?
I'm going to go watch the Lakers now.
Okay, have fun. Good to see you. Okay, not seeing any other general public comments, I'm going to close the period for now. And we are going to move to our first action item, which is the Isla Vista Interpersonal Violence Investigator 2020-2021 Annual Report.
Excellent. I'm pulling up the presentation right now to get it on present mode and my screen shared. And I'd really like to introduce our presenters today, which are Lieutenant Matt Bly and Corporal Ariel Borns and Detective Covina Avila, who are presenting about the interpersonal violence investigator. In the attachments that you had, the PowerPoint was updated slightly yesterday, but it is the same one that you were shared, and you also got the monthly reports for each of the months of activity. So I'm getting my screen shared now, and
Hey, John.
is that working? Yes.
Did you want me to run the PowerPoint, or were you going to run it for her?
I could run it if you would like to. If that's also possible. I didn't hear anything, but if you'd like to do it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me share my screen. I can click through for her.
Sure. All right. You are eligible to share. Great. Well, I'll turn it over to you all to get the presentation started. Thank you.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Uh-oh.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Technology is not my strength. Luckily, you hired me for my strength. Thank you again for having me to present the annual review over the past year. And it's always nice to see you again. I cannot wait till we can see each other in public. So if we go to the second page, just a little overview. I've been in law enforcement for 9 years. I started out at the district attorney's office, and then I started out in Guadalupe Police Department. And my work responsibilities include basically what you hired me to do: investigating VAWA crimes, which is the dating and domestic violence, sexual assault and stalking, conducting trauma-informed interviews on all of those reports, identifying suspects, interviewing witnesses, gathering evidence, interviewing suspects, and documenting all of that and presenting it to the district attorney's office if the survivor wishes to do so, all while updating the survivor and our advocates sometimes on behalf of the survivor. Excuse me, sorry, my page closed. The most fulfilling part of my job, it obviously, is knowing that I'm helping others. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, but I'm just going to read the first sentence of it. And when I was in the academy and we had to memorize this, the first time I read it, I actually got goosebumps. So it's, as a law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve humankind, to safeguard lives and property, to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. That is still so important to me. Every single officer has taken an oath to do so. And I'm just very lucky that, you know, my department saw my strength and gave me the training to move forward with that. And I'm also very lucky that you all selected me to be your interpersonal violence investigator for the Isla Vista community. I understand that my cases are like the largest, biggest things affecting the lives of the survivors. And I really do try to treat them all like if they're, as if some, I really try to treat them as if they were my own family members and how I would want them to be treated in the same situation. Let's see here. My most fulfilling part of my job, hobbies. So yeah, some of the hobbies that I used to de-stress are meditation, yoga, walking outside. If you see me walking outside, don't be afraid to say hi. It really does clear my mind when I'm outside. I'm solar powered. I get back in my office and I'm renewed, and I have a different mindset if I've been like typing reports for a while. I preferably like Lagoon Island. So if you see me out there, don't be afraid to say hi. I'd love to say hi. My fun fact is the only thing I've ever won was a Macarena competition when I was 9. My parents used to volunteer for the San Ynez mission at the hamburger and make hamburgers, like the hamburger tent, for years and years and years. And I was very shy growing up, believe it or not. And you know, I remember practicing in my room. It was very popular back then. I'm probably dating myself. Unfortunately, I didn't think that through, but I got on stage and I actually won, and it really affected my life, obviously so much that I'm presenting it to you all right now. Some of the trainings that I've gone to obviously are all within the realm of, you know, what I investigate. We also offer free trainings to any community organizations. The body safety, which is the renamed Good Touch, Bad Touch, the safety talks that we give to honestly, any anyone that asks for it, we will give those talks. And then also our COT team has many trainings that they can provide as well. And they can also alter the trainings on the needs or the request of those that ask. So community outreach. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to go back really quick. Sorry, I am not in my office, so I am not quite as organized, but I don't know if I've ever actually explained like what I train the children to do in body safety. So I just wanted to take a sec to go over that. How to identify an emergency and contact emergency personnel, identifying private parts as, the parts of the body that are covered by the bathing suit. I go over secrets, stranger danger, developing boundaries, and, who a trusted person is, in that they can go to them for help. And we also practice saying no. I don't just tell them to say no. We come up with like rated G situations, and they actually practice saying no and then telling someone. And I actually don't have the second page of that. I'm sorry. So the community outreach continued. I'm sorry, the first page. I'm scrolling on my other phone. I remember reaching out to DV Solutions, CARE, STESA, everyone that had direct contact with survivors, probably I think like in March or April, pretty soon into COVID, just asking them if they needed any help or if I could volunteer off of my time to see if they needed any assistance. And they really just wanted all officers to know that even though their shelters are closed due to COVID, that they had agreements with hotels that were donating their rooms if anyone needed those instead of a shelter, since the shelters were closed. We worked back and forth for a while with STESA, and we did an interview of like what an investigation would look like. I'm very excited about that. I was also very nervous about that. Also, public speaking is not a strength of mine. But they're wonderful people to work with. They love what they do, and they made me feel very comfortable. Obviously, that's what they're really good at. And it was really exciting to just see the feedback from that, because my hope was that someone could see me be friendly and happy, and any preconceived notions from movies or past experiences could maybe be lowered if they're like, oh, this is actually the person who I will report to. She seems friendly and funny and professional and trustworthy. That was my hope. In December, I was interviewed by the Daily Nexus. And in March, I really tried to reach out to the child care centers. I think it was just too soon, but hopefully we'll come up with something so that we can at least reach the children that were in this school year so that I can present to them. We had the denim day that our department participated in. And then honestly, just the COT team has just done an amazing job with outreach during COVID. I'm assuming everyone's on Instagram once a day, and they did such a great job promoting the different services through our Instagram accounts. So I have to give a shout out to them. So the next page is the challenges that were faced. I just put a picture there that really kind of tells about COVID. We still volunteered for the Special Olympics. That's me on the right dying. That's what I look like when I am dying. I had a mask on and just running with the mask in the heat and breathing your own carbon dioxide. It was difficult, but we still did it. And I kind of feel like that's how this year was. It was difficult, but we still did it. Things had to change. We had to alter and adapt. Most of the challenges, obviously, no person-to-person communication. Right there in the beginning too, I think everyone was so fearful, and we're just trying. I mean, everyone knows what it was like. And then so we adapted and we used Zoom, but you cannot see all of the nonverbal cues that I like to look for. The tapping of the foot, you can kind of see more in someone's eyes if if they need a break. Just being empathetic is key when conducting a trauma-informed interview. However, you can only see so much in a screen, and sometimes survivors, had dark lighting and you can't see as much. And I really, really, that's just something we have with Zoom. So I had to adapt and check in more and see how they were doing. Everyone was quarantined, so people were back at home. So in the beginning, when we kept thinking that the stay-at-home order was not going to be that long, it's like, okay, well, we will interview the people in person in a month or, whenever it was, but it just kept getting elongated and extended because especially with suspect interviews, I want to interview a suspect in person every single time. And that was just so difficult. And we had to adjust. We eventually had to start interviewing suspects over the phone, which I don't feel like I'm giving my best when I'm doing but that's how it had to be. There's a lot, as much as there is to pick up in a survivor trauma-informed interview, there is just the same amount to pick up on deception in a suspect interview. The court closures, that was a whole headache on its own. A lot of cases, unfortunately, and you'll read, were dismissed. They just had too many cases stacking up, not enough manpower, and COVID really, unfortunately, was a huge disservice for a lot of cases. Just the amount of stress that it added to survivors was huge as well. Slower response from not only the courts, but other resources. Everyone's working from home. So those phone numbers that I used to have to direct lines on desks, and, you build a rapport with someone and in a different department and they can give you the information you need, but now they're working from home and things just took so long. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm hoping next year I won't even have to have a slide on that. So the current Isla Vista cases, currently we have 5. So to go more in depth, the first one is a non-stranger sexual assault. A trauma-informed interview was conducted, and a cold call is to be scheduled when the survivor returns to school. The survivor left for COVID, and a cold call is something that we have to do in person. And so we're just awaiting the return of that survivor. And that's the exact same situation in the case after that. So I'm hoping we will get a lot of cold calls done this summer, or when the students come back into session. The next case was another case where I'm waiting till the student comes back as a student in school, just so that I can locate them. I'm having a very, very difficult time locating someone in that case. The next one is a non-stranger sodomy. Trauma-informed interview was conducted, and the survivor actually just wanted it a documentation only, no investigation desired. So they were connected with all the resources, and now they have this report they have a copy of it, and if they want, they can try and get a civil restraining order or whatever they want with that, but that's what they want, and they're informed of the statute of limitations, and they can come back anytime, and we can move forward with that. So the closed cases, we have two of them, I wish I had the dates on those. They were probably like a few weeks apart. They were harassment of the Jewish community. And the next one was a suspicious circumstance investigation where the last location the survivor remembers being was in Isla Vista and was, located in an area with, bruises and bleeding and missing jewelry and pooled, a pooled neckline on the t-shirt where it was stretched out and parts of their body was sore. So we conducted it as, possible sexual assault or battery and a systematic search. I feel like we went to almost every apartment in the area to see if there was any evidence and to see if there were any witnesses. However, the survivor did decide after the first day of going door to door and seeing if anyone heard or saw anything, decided that they did not wish to move forward with an investigation. But the same thing, had everything that they need and know that they can come back within the statute of limitations. The next one is another sexual assault. Trauma-informed interview was conducted. Several cold calls were conducted, yielding negative results. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. And then, unfortunately, due to COVID, I had to actually call the suspect, and there was no answer. And we try a certain amount of times, and we didn't get anything there. So that case, unfortunately, is closed. The next case is a stalking case. My opinion, we had a lot of good evidence in that stalking case. However, it was dismissed. So I think they just, had different standards in COVID. And unfortunately, that was one of those cases. The next case was a domestic violence case. So that's a felony case. So domestic violence felony case. This survivor did have injuries. The suspect was served with an EPO. However, they did violate the emergency protective order and violated it again. There's several supplements on this case. It's kind of been an ongoing thing. However, the survivor just wanted to feel safe, and we worked with CARE and the survivor to get a temporary restraining order that should be good for 3 years. But unfortunately, the suspect pled down to a 653M, which is an annoying and harassing communication with 1 year probation. Moving forward, I put pictures prior to COVID. I love working with children and giving them the tools that they need to create their own boundaries. In-person presentations, that's my jam, and I cannot wait to do those again. I cannot wait for the courts to reopen. The courts is just such a huge, vital part of the criminal justice system, and I cannot wait for them to open fully again. Hopefully that will be soon. Just getting in-person resources for survivors is huge. And we will hopefully keep on getting referrals from CARE, STESA, and UCPD, the emergency line, and from the community too. And so within the realm of investigating interpersonal violence, if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Detective Avila, for that presentation. I want to open it up for our board. Any questions from the board? I see Director Flaherty to be followed by Director Freeman.
Hi, thank you for coming to present. I really appreciated hearing all of this and all the work that you're doing in our community. I have two pretty unrelated questions. The first question is how most people come to or like know to find you. Is it mainly through organizations that people have heard about it? Is it mainly from someone speaking to a police officer and then they're referred to speak to you? I was just curious on that process.
That's a great question. So I can only speak for the cases that are on my desk. So the cases that are on my desk are, I'd say, pretty split. Most of them we receive from Care and Stessa, and the other half would be 911 calls, either reporting parties or witnesses calling in, or sometimes the survivors calling in themselves. We do sometimes get cases like last year, we did have a couple cases that came in from Santa Barbara City College administration there, just from the networking that was non-existent before, but now I feel like I can call them my BFFs. That, you know, they all know that I'm available and they just send survivors directly to me. And that's honestly the way that I would like. I don't want much handing off because we don't want to re-traumatize. Part of a trauma-informed interview, the biggest part of it is to minimize the amount of times the survivor is being re-interviewed, because we all know that those emotions, that their truth is attached to emotions. So we definitely don't want to re-trigger. So the more people that know about me and what I do and what I can do for the community and how I can help, the easier it's been. And also too, from the community, sometimes I will get like direct emails as well, but they're just not as common. I would pretty much say it's mostly Care and the emergency line at the department.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
I was also curious too, this is a bit more of a specific question, but I was curious on the law / like precedent of like if survivors can choose to reopen a case that was closed because of COVID. I don't know I don't really know the practices of reopening something if they wanted to, and especially how that would relate to COVID, but I was just curious on that.
Yeah, so I mean, luckily we have great statute of limitations, and prior to January 2017, most sexual assaults and most child sex crimes, the survivor has until their 39th birthday. But after January 2017, a wonderful thing happened and they removed all statute of limitations. So there is no statute of limitations for the survivor to report. However, if you're talking about that stalking case that was, basically dismissed in court from the DA's office, unfortunately, that cannot be reopened. It's like would be double jeopardy, So I'm sure there's a legal process where they can like fight it and argue it. And I think there's probably more cases than mine that unfortunately has happened to. But I just don't know that process yet. That would definitely be something that I could probably reach out to the district attorney's office to see how they're moving forward with some of those cases. But usually when something's been like concluded in court and finalized, it's usually pretty final.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Freeman, you're next.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So my question is actually about, I just want to, how much of your time, and maybe the answer is none, and that's great, but I'm curious, how much of your time is spent on tasks that are not related to this? I know in the past, occasionally it's been the case that you've been borrowed by the department for other purposes, and I'm wondering whether that's still the case.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I know in the past, you've been borrowed by the department for things that are other than interpersonal
Mhm.
violence in Isla Vista, and I'm curious to know whether that's still the case, and if so, what percentage of time that is, and how that works out. It might be that this does not happen anymore, which is both reassuring on a budget perspective and very depressing from the perspective of what it means for the amount of interpersonal violence in our area. But
Yes. So obviously we were pooled for COVID for about 3 months when everything was fresh and new. I have not been pooled since. I have been basically at my desk, just utilizing Zoom. And now a lot of this, for example, a lot of the things I do aren't even like on this piece of paper. Like, for example, just yesterday, one of the survivors really wants to conduct a trauma-informed interview with me, so wants to report, which is wonderful. However, she's not in this area and she's actually out of state. So, and with the time zone difference and trying to call and see what their equivalent of care is there so that they have an advocate and that they have a soft room and just, there's, or maybe there's a domestic violence advocacy center that has a soft room and an advocate. And it's just, things just take so much time when you're not familiar with the area. But luckily, CARE has been so helpful sometimes when they can, or when they know someone because of trainings and stuff, they'll usually try to help me out with that. But that's not always the case. So there's so many things on these pages that sometimes I'm like, where did my day go? Like, it's already, like, I haven't even had lunch yet and it's already here. But yeah, I have not been pulled since then. I'm mostly at my desk because of Zoom meetings and everything. That's where you can find me unless you catch me on my walk. But yeah, I'm happy. I'm working on these cases and I haven't been pulled for anything else since then. So thanks for asking, and it's nice to see you again.
thank you so much for the answer.
Any other questions from directors? Go ahead, Director Bertrand.
Thank you. Well, first, I just really want to thank you, Detective Avila, for your continued work on this. Each year, we get to see your passion for serving survivors in our community. You're really making a difference, and I know that you're there. You're easily accessible. There have been times when members of our team have reached out to you, and you are always doing everything you can to help people. So on behalf of all of us, just thank you so much. And I'm looking forward with this program. Is there anything else we can do to support your work, either by changing how we partner with you on this program or supporting other needs in the community?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm blushing. It's so, I mean, I think we all get along so well because we're passionate about, helping, these vulnerable survivors. And then to answer the and also, you all are part of the community and you all are looked upon when people ask for help. And so just guiding them my way, and you are the eyes and ears out there. We cannot do this without you. And I think the biggest thing that could help me is just more and more people knowing that I'm available and how available I am, and reporting options. I think I worked with SASA, about reporting options and trying to get them on posters around campus, because some people know, oh, well, I don't want to investigate, so I don't have to go to law enforcement. But yes, you can still get resources and get a trauma-informed interview and get it documented and have a copy for a restraining order or whichever. There's so many different options, and it's sometimes a case-by-case situation, but there's like 4 different reporting options, and getting that out there. And SASA was wonderful at working with that. And I think COVID just kind of put brakes on things. So I'm very excited to see how things are going to bloom, especially after how people have been at home thinking and really thinking and reflecting. So hopefully we just have some really good new energy for this year. And I cannot wait to see what this year brings.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Detective Avila from directors?
Spencer, you can call me Coco if my last name's hard for you. That's okay.
We'll go with Coco then.
Okay.
I wanted to say one thing, which is that I think it really speaks volumes that even when some of our former residents who may have had to move out of the area due to COVID hardships, when they're not in the area, they're still coming to you because they trust you. They trust the work you do and the resources that you can help provide them, which I just think is really incredible. So I'm very appreciative of all the work that you do every single day for survivors in our community, for our community at large, helping to make it less likely that people are made into survivors with the trainings that you do. The one question that I have, because I really appreciated that you outlined all the different cases that we had this year that are open and ongoing, and help explain that for us, because I think sometimes when we talk about violence against women and these other crimes in the abstract, sometimes the details get a little bit lost, and it's really nice to be able to see that. And one of the things that I heard from you is that there are a number of survivors that have wanted to have a documentation only sort of interview and report.
Yes.
Can you explain for my benefit, or also for the members of the public, what's the benefit and the purpose of something like that?
So that is something that I've really seen an increase in ever since you all started having me as your interpersonal violence investigator. And it's just an option as long as it doesn't fall within the mandate of, the child sex crimes, child abuse, elder abuse are an imminent threat to the community. As long as it doesn't fall into any of our mandates, then a survivor, as long as they're not a minor, has the choice to keep that control of that situation. And the last thing we want to ever do is force someone to do something. And so that's why we're very, most of the advocates are very familiar with our mandates, so that the survivor can still have that power. Now, obviously, I would love it if everyone wants to report to me for an investigation so that I can, investigate it and put someone in jail so they don't harm anyone else. But that's not everyone's choice. There's so many different reasons why survivors do not disclose. And there is no normal way that a survivor can handle trauma. So some of the options, there's many options, but one of the options of documentation only, honestly, is so that they can receive their resources from us, receive a trauma-informed interview sooner than later. Trauma is stored in the amygdala in the brain. That's the same place where memories are stored. So they may remember slivers, or it may be not chronological. And like I've said numerous times, it can mimic deception. But those of us that are trauma-informed, like our entire department, understand that's what trauma can look like. So being able to interview a survivor sooner than later, like with any memory, may dissipate. So getting all those memories down. Also for court, the less that a survivor has talked about their truth and the incident, the more it looks accurate in court. And this has nothing to do whether I believe them or they believe them. Our department, follows the Start by Believing campaign. But when it does go to court, those are things that come up by defense attorneys. If they want it to go to court, those are things that come up by defense attorneys. So the less people that they tell and talk to, basically gives more validity to their memory, and more like, I can't think of the word, but like more truth to their memory. So getting all that down, because maybe in 10 years or 20 years, they may not remember as much. And then also I ask a lot of questions. It's a very thorough, in-depth interview, but also so that they can see that I am respectful of their time. I'm friendly, I'm professional, and getting their resources, having an advocate present, and maybe processing this in a healthy manner and having a safety plan after. Sometimes they are not ready to report, but they have this report so that, who knows, maybe when they're married, thinking about having their first child, it's a trigger and they're ready to report, or they may never report, and that's okay. That is their decision, and we respect that, and we tell them that. But a lot of survivors that are not ready to report find it empowering to at least come to law enforcement, have a good experience, as good as it can be, considering a decent experience with us, talking about the situation, having it documented. And if it's something where they're not ready to report for an investigation, but maybe there's, for example, a child custody battle, it's good for court there. A separate domestic violence situation where it didn't meet the mandates, it's good to show like proof there. And it's also good for a restraining order. It really helps make the restraining order request more meaty when you have a law enforcement case number and a whole trauma-informed interview attached to the restraining order. Because when a survivor applies for a civil restraining order, they have to retell their truth again, which is what we try to minimize. So now they can just attach their report. They don't have to retell their truth, and they can just attach it. It's very detailed. I cannot imagine how many times they would have to retell their story, because we have everything in there. So I think it's just a tool, no matter where in the process a survivor is. And they may not even want to do any of that. If they just want that, we'll give that to them. It's part of the Victims' Bill of Rights. You know, any survivor of sexual assault can have a copy, and we just try to make that process as easy as possible. We inform them. I call them when my report's done. I talk to the record supervisor and tell them, okay, she does want to report, what day works for you. And I basically set it up so they just go to the lobby, meet our lovely record supervisor, get their report, show their ID, and it's as painless as possible as we can make it. That was a really long way of answering your question, but I hope I answered it for you.
Well, I appreciate the thoroughness because I think this is a topic. The reason I asked the question is because I don't know how much awareness there is in the broader community that there are these different types of options. And I love to hear you explain it and talk about it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? All right, not seeing any. I want to open it up for public comment. Anyone who has a comment on this item can hit the raise hand button or put something in the chat. I see we have one comment in the chat from Ash who just says, thanks, Detective Avila. So I wanted to highlight that. And then I see a hand from Mark Vukovic. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Detective. Appreciate it. I have a couple questions. So one of which is, this is kind of, all my questions are along the lines of stuff that's been asked, but like, I don't have a clear sense of if this is a lot or a little casework. I mean, I think of like one of my favorite shows of all time, The Wire, where it's all of these overworked homicide detectives who have like 15 homicides each and are understaffed severely. Is this the amount of open cases at the moment? Is this a lot of work for a single individual, or is this pretty reasonable, and how does that fluctuate?
So Mark, I would first like to explain that to me personally, I feel like asking like is the amount of cases you have, how busy you are, because there are other detectives that I go to trainings with, and they have like, 15 cases, 20 cases in really, really busy departments. But it's really about the quality. We do things, we are so survivor centered at UCSB that unfortunately, I don't see that everywhere. And I really hope that eventually all the other departments can kind of be up to our standard and we continue to grow as well. But the amount of communication we do with the survivor, we're a student population, so I am not just updating the survivor. If the survivor gives consent to update their parents, I'm also calling up and updating the parents, it's really, there is so much communication involved. There's so much background work. There's so much digging, because if we don't do it, if the advocates and I don't do it, the survivor's going to have to do it. And, my opinion, not the opinion of the department, is that this criminal justice as a whole, a lot of that really falls on the survivor, unfortunately, because the burden of proof, and where it falls, unfortunately. So we try really hard to alleviate as much as we can for the survivor when we don't have to, but it's the right thing to do. So I feel pretty confident about all the cases I have. And when I assign myself a case and I get it, that they are going to get, the best that I can do with the resources that I have. And unfortunately, there has been probably a handful of survivors in the past 3 years that I've been doing this that have been, survivors before in different agencies, and they just are in tears and they give me such good feedback. And it's so sad that it is 2021 and some of these things are still happening, and I just try to do the best that I can do, and make it as painless as I can and take a lot of that burden off of the survivor. So I guess, again, that was a long answer because this is my job. I love what I do. It's really about the quality of how we handle all of these cases, because I see numbers. I don't ever remember the numbers. I see the faces of my survivors. And again, I like to treat everyone. I like to think that I'm treating everyone as if I would want my family members and my brothers and sisters to be treated. And so I might take it a little personal, but we really do. We do the right thing. And, I hope we can see that more places.
Awesome, thank you. I have two other questions, one of which is, I think we've, as a student myself, I've heard a lot about how we can prevent sexual assault, sexual harassment, being a good bystander and intervening, just being just a good friend in general, standing up for what's right. Is there anything the public can do or should know about investigations and helping with if we see something? I think it might go back to what you said about reaching out to you. That's one question. My other question is have you worked with any the Pan-Hellenic sororities and fraternities by talking about your work, or really any other organizations besides, I think you mentioned SASA, but I'm curious if there's been any others too.
Yes, of course. I like your questions. So to answer your first question, and I'm trying to remind myself, which was about
public and investigations
and what they should know.
Yeah.
In a public setting, there's not I wish in a private setting I can tell everyone. I think it's cool stuff that we're able to do. And that's entrusted in us, but it's not as cool as NCIS and all of that stuff. We cannot get a fingerprint off of a dollar bill and have it identified in a day, not even. But we have some pretty cool investigatory tools. And the only reason why they're still good investigatory tools is because the general public does not know them, or else I feel like there would be elimination of evidence, which is also illegal, but then we wouldn't have the evidence. So I think one way that can really help an investigation is just being a very good witness. So you mentioned bystander intervention. We touch on that on some of our, we call them safety talks. And being a good witness is really pull your phone. If an incident just happened, pull your phone out and record everyone around. Everyone around is a possible witness So just provide that to law enforcement. I just took this when this happened, and maybe we can identify some people from that video. That would be huge. If there's a vehicle involved, trying to memorize the license plate, I think I just went blank, but there's so many ways that go beyond bystander intervention. Obviously, when the situation is safer after the fact, those are things that are really huge tools that help us identify who witnesses are and identify where evidence may be. So that's very helpful. Yeah, I think that's all I can come up with right now on the spot. And to answer your other question, COVID, unfortunately, we were not able to do as many safety talks as we like to do. In the safety talks, I wish I had it with me because I guess I'm a little rusty. It's been a while. We do go over some bystander intervention. We go over like safe partying. We go over how to respond if someone discloses a sexual assault to you or domestic violence. We go over precursors of stalking and why they're so important and why they're red flags, and survivors should listen to their gut feeling when there's red flags. We go over stalking, and we go over strangulation and how important it is to seek medical attention if that's happened, even if law enforcement is not desired at that time. Go over a lot of different things. It's about a 45-minute presentation. Honestly, the hardest part is just getting people to want to listen to me. It's like, I don't know how to advertise it. So if you know of any way, that'd be great. But a lot of the sororities and fraternities, what I do in the beginning of every year is I'm able to get a list of all the presidents and I shoot them out all emails, and we go back and forth trying to plan the scheduling and everything. And then sometimes some want a little more domestic violence, sometimes some want a little more, so we adjusted a little bit, still getting all the meat and potatoes in there. And we've given presentations to some intercollegiate athletic groups, and then also some other sports teams. But I'd say a majority of the people that we give these talks to are, sororities and fraternities, but we are more than welcome to give them to anyone who would listen to me, because I feel like there is such good information in there. And if it's the person listening may never use it, but if they have a friend that discloses something to them, then they have this wealth of information to provide to them, because sometimes it's hard to look for help when something super traumatic just happened. And hitting the last thing a survivor needs to do after a traumatic moment is hit a wall and hit a wall and hit a wall. So I just hope we can get this information out to whomever will let me give it to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I look forward to attending one of your trainings in the future.
Me too, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions and comments, Mark. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Okay, then with that, I'll close the public comment period and we'll come back to the board. Kavina, go ahead.
So I did want to introduce a new detective that is that helps me sometimes. She does most of the VAWA crimes on campus. So I wanted to give her a second to introduce herself, if that's okay, just so you can be familiar with her face.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Arlene Samaniego, and I'm the newly assigned detective. I'll work closely with Detective Avila. I've been with UCSB PD for 4.5 years. I am a gaucho. I did graduate from UCSB. It's something I'm very proud of. And I spent most of my time on patrol up until this past January when I was assigned to detectives. So I have a lot to learn. And I have a lot to do, and I look forward to meeting every single one of you and learning and growing with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective. It was very good to meet you, and thank you for your service. Excellent. Well, with that, I'll bring it back to the board if there's any other comments or feedback that the board wants to give on this presentation. Director Bertrand.
Thank you. Well, I know we had our finance committee meeting last night, which we'll talk more about later, and we're in the process of preparing our budget for the next fiscal year. Ahead of hearing this presentation, we actually put a placeholder number in our budget because we know how much this program means to us, and we want to see it continue. So I'm just putting that out there for the full board. This is something that our finance committee is recommending, and it's because there's really a need. And we see that in these presentations each year. And there's so much work to be done. And this is one way that we are contributing to the goal of ending sexual violence in our community in partnership with so many other organizations. So that's definitely our recommendation. And just thanks again to Detective Avila, Detective Samaniego, and everyone at UCPD for making this happen.
Thank you, Ethan.
All right, if there are no other comments, I'll again thank Detective Avila for your presentation, and we look forward to future collaboration and partnership with you and UCPD. Thank you.
Same, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we're going to move to the next item, which is item 4.2, the Isla Vista Community Garden 2020-2021 Annual Report.
Great, thank you. We have our presenters here, Kai and Katie Maynard. Do you all want to do the presentation, or do you want me to do it?
Either way is fine. I don't mind.
Okay, I'll take care of it, the slides then.
Cool.
Let me get them up. So give me just 1 second and I'll turn it over to you. So the Community Garden, it's a grant that we've awarded to the University Methodist Church for, this is the second year that we've done it, second full year that we've done it. And it's a grant, not a contract. It's a little different than some of our other agreements, but it's a grant of $19,000, and it funds community engagement operations and supplies, and it's a cool program, and we hope, we've discussed how we could make it work more in collaboration with our compost collective, but that's also where one of our compost piles is located, is at this garden. So it is an exciting program we have, and I'd like to turn it over to our presenters to get started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you all for having us today. My name is Kai Guzman. I know my Zoom name says Jonathan, but you can just call me Kai. I'm a third year at UCSD, and I'm currently the garden coordinator at the Methodist Garden. So today I'm just going to be getting into what we've been up to for the past year and talking about how things are going overall. You can go ahead to the next slide. So what has been going on at the Methodist Garden? Well, in February 2020, we were awarded some funds to essentially continue our mission of serving the Isla Vista community. What does that mean? Basically addressing and helping to improve food security, providing education to the community, and just overall fostering a sense of community in Isla Vista. I think it's been a crazy year for everyone. And I think the role that the garden has played in the Isla Vista community has been more important than ever, but especially because I started working at the garden in, I think it was late September, early October. And I really saw the impact that just this space had on everyone that came to visit. So yeah, I think the garden's more important than ever through this entire pandemic. Yeah, you can go ahead and go on to the next slide. Yeah, so one of the main things that the garden provides the community is primarily as a food resource. We provide high quality organic produce to anyone who comes in. We have a variety of things. We're growing everything seasonal. Yeah, most people that take produce from the garden are usually just drop by, pick a couple of things and go, but I've also seen people take full like bucketfuls of kale. Some people just take herbs. Like it serves a very wide variety of people, and everyone that comes in is incredibly diverse. We have students, we have members of the church congregation coming in, members of the houses community, and basically anyone that's walking by. I think the biggest issue at the moment is that more people don't know about it, because I think if more people knew about this garden, more people would be making use of everything it has to offer. So yeah, that's been a pretty easy thing to keep up throughout the past year, even with everything going on. It's just like I take care of the garden and I grow things, so no real impact there. Aside from that, another cool thing that we've done to support the community as a food source was distribute strawberry clones from our strawberry patch. I don't know if everyone here knows how strawberries grow, but they essentially, you have one plant, they'll send out little runners, and those runners will plant into the ground. And once they establish, you have an entirely new strawberry plant. And I didn't know this before I started working at the garden. It was actually when I was working with one of our volunteers. They were explaining more or less how it was, how strawberries functioned and like how much of a resource they can be. So I want to take use of that and essentially just repot these strawberry clones that we're establishing and distributing them to people who wanted them. It really, everyone that I gave a strawberry clone to seemed to really enjoy it. Not only was it like something really cool as like a food resource, but it was also something I think that kept morale a bit high. You know, when you're cooped inside for such a long period of time, I think just having your little strawberry plant to go out and tend to every day can, you know, be the difference between a good day and a bad day. So that was a project that I was really proud of from this past year. You can go ahead into the next slide. Another huge, I think this was a huge milestone for the garden. But for a while now, we've been trying to get to the point where we can directly start distributing food to like food banks and other distribution like methods. Because at the moment, well, not at the moment, but previously, before we had met the California small farm guidelines, we couldn't really advertise the garden as like something to like we couldn't directly provide produce to people because we hadn't met certain requirements. But now what we had done over the past year was essentially try to meet all the requirements that they had. A large part of that was addressing the compost bins. So where we had the compost bins originally was along Camino del Sur, and that was a bit of an issue in that it was right next to one of our larger grow areas. So what we had to do was essentially just move the compost bin to the other side of the church. That way, when it like rained, we wouldn't have like compost water going down into the grow area, because that's kind of a big no-no. So moving that basically opened up an entire new area for us, and now we can more or less donate the food that we're growing over there instead of just having people coming in and grabbing it. Aside from that, we're also just generally practicing better composting, which basically that means ensuring that our compost process is fully. There's no like little like large bits of like vegetables or anything in there. That it's just like good composted soil. A large part of that is just essentially tracking how long it's been composting for, and just keeping track of when we put the compost in different areas, like if we're doing a topsoil amendment. And yeah, that's a really huge milestone for us. I'm really excited to start donating food, because it's great when people come in to take the food, but I think with larger vegetables, kind of like squash or melons or like corn, for example, I think people who don't garden are a little intimidated when they see these things, and they don't want to just take them because I don't know, they feel like they're kind of destroying a plant, I think. So I think being able to donate is going to be super huge, in that we're going to be wasting less food, because sometimes some of these like gourds or melons would just go to waste because no one would pick them in time, or if I couldn't find them or get to them in time, they would just go to waste. So it's really exciting that we get to actually make use of these a bit more efficiently going forward. Yeah, and you can go ahead to the next slide. aside from the meeting the California small farm guidelines, we've done some other garden improvement. Again, this has a lot to do with composting. Composting is essentially the lifeblood of the garden. It keeps everything running. Just as Jonathan mentioned, we've been collaborating with IVCC and a bunch of individual households and individuals to just run a composting service. Anyone just comes in, drops off their compost. I essentially just take care of it, make sure all the ratios are right with the food scraps and the mulch. So that's been super awesome. The quality of the soil has improved immensely through the compost. And I played around with some other methods this year to improve soil quality. One of them being cover cropping, which is essentially just crops that you grow and then you cut down after they get to full size and you reintroduce it to the soil, and it incorporates more like organic matter and nutrients into the soil. So when you grow on that soil the next time, it's just higher nutrient dense and just like better soil. And aside from that, we've also been trying to implement more native plants into the garden. This is something I'm particularly passionate about. I think people see landscaping as something where there's like kind of a finite number of things that you can use to just like make something look nice. I think that incorporating more native plants and normalizing that as like a new type of landscape, not a new type of landscaping, but like something that you see around more often. I think that's really important. And it's a really important education opportunity, I think, for the community, just showing off these native plants. Yeah, and so on the left here, we got some California white sage, and on the right, we got some California poppies that have been sprouting up from the seeds that I sowed, and the left one was a transplant, but yeah, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Yeah, as far as community outreach goes, I really want to give our outreach team props, because when it came to adapting to the pandemic, I think they did a killer job. They really backed it up, because at least with me, it was an easier transition in that I was just taking care of the garden, but they essentially had to restructure everything. They offered a ton of workshops, like 7 6-week workshops, all catered to the online learning aspect. So you could do it via Zoom. So like indoor gardening, which was offered 4 times, advanced indoor gardening, which was offered once, and then we had Introduction to October Gardening, which is offered twice. We also had some food justice reading groups, which were incredibly important in my opinion. I think they were super awesome. And these workshops served like 411 community members. So they had a pretty significant impact, I think. I personally, my role in community outreach was essentially with volunteers. I would meet up with volunteers at the garden. They would help me out. I would teach them what was more or less going on, my process, just generally teaching them more about gardening, specifically in Santa Barbara. All of it was done with masks and socially distanced. And I think it offered these volunteers not only an educational opportunity, but time to just get out of the house and do something stimulating and have some degree of social interaction. It was really fun. One of my favorite parts of the job is working with volunteers. It's awesome. I think I learned as much from them as they learned from me. And besides the volunteers, we also, at the garden, we provided a shelter in place location for several members of the house's community in Isla Vista. I love those. Everyone on site was so awesome. I got to know them so well. They were around me all the time when I was working. It was super sad. As with the church started doing some remodeling activities, so we could no longer have them sleeping adjacent to the walls. It just wasn't safe. So unfortunately, they had to leave the property, but they still come around all the time. I still get to see them a lot, and they're still taking advantage of the garden, which makes me incredibly happy. Yeah, you could go ahead and move on to the next slide. Yeah, so moving forward into 2021 and 2022, as I mentioned with the California Small Farm Guidelines, having met that, we're going to be able to start donating food. And one of my main goals is to establish a very consistent and efficient food donation schedule. So that meaning, like, when I see something is ripe and it's just hasn't been taken yet, we at the garden more or less know, like, okay, we know when we can start donating, we know who to contact, we know when they're accepting food. I wanted to have that infrastructure in place. Again, just to minimize, we don't want any food waste going on. So an efficient food donation schedule is kind of #1 priority for me at the moment. So I'm currently I'm trying to build those relationships right now. I've been in contact with Food Not Bombs. I'm trying to see where that goes, but yeah, it's super exciting. Aside from that, another thing I learned from my time at the garden was how much, not only as like a food resource for people, but as a place to kind of get away from everything and kind of ground yourself. I think the garden offers something really unique that other parks in Isla Vista just simply don't offer, because it is a space to grow vegetables, and just it offers like a different vibe than the other parks. So we have some sitting areas in the garden, which they're nice, but I would like to have more sitting areas, and maybe sitting areas that can be used more effectively for students or just people who want to sit and eat. So I'm going to try to integrate more sitting areas into the garden with like tables, chairs, adequate shade. And I've been discussing a meditation garden, both for the congregation and for the community, kind of near the back area of the church, that is primarily landscaped with native plants, ideally. That's still in discussion, but I think, again, that would also be a great opportunity. Yeah, and this past year, as far as expanding to new garden locations, it's been a bit difficult to build the relationships, just because either people haven't been operating, or it's been hard to get in contact, or they've just been so preoccupied trying to deal with the pandemic that it has been tough to build the relationships and connect in a way that we can start to discuss possibly getting a garden in new locations. So that, again, is going to be something that we're looking forward to in this next coming year. I'm super excited about it, just because like I more or less know how everything's working with the garden, and I think that will enable me to more effectively talk to these people about the logistics, because I understand what goes into it and how much work goes into it and what is actually necessary for this to happen. So again, very excited about that, but that's working for that in the future. You go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so this is our list of expenses for 2020 and 2021. We more or less stayed pretty much on budget. The only thing that we were not able to implement from this budget was the houseless employment. That was something that we put a lot of effort into, and the model we were going for was essentially like an independent contractor model. And we were working with one individual who was living on site at the garden at the time, and it was very tough to implement, in that like we needed essentially the model needed him to get his own contractor's license, and some other it was mostly licensing issues. So yeah, it was really difficult to implement. It took a very long time, and he ended up leaving before we were able to actually get the process completed. So what we're looking at going forward is essentially to hopefully collaborate with IVCSD and Isla Vista Beautiful, and incorporate the gardens in that way, just because I think they have a more well-equipped staff and infrastructure to get this going, essentially. But yeah, so we took the money from that, and we were a bit underspent for staffing, just because there was a gap in between when Whitner was working and when I was hired. So we used the funds from the staffing gap and the houseless employment for just tools and a few other things. You can go ahead to the 2021-2022 budget. Yeah, and for this, we kept the budget more or less the same, aside from the housing employment, and we added water into this budget because the Methodist Church has been essentially supplying us with the water necessary for the garden for a couple of years now. And with all the renovations that are currently going on, it just doesn't seem possible. So we worked that into the budget. to hopefully pay for that going forward, all the water bills, because it is a pretty significant amount of money for them, especially with everything that's going on. And yeah, that's pretty much the 2021-2022 budget. You can go on to the next slide if you like. Yeah, thank you guys. The support of the IVCSD board has really just let the garden grow and flourish. I know this is my first time meeting you guys, but I'm really looking forward to working with you guys in the future and getting to know everyone a little bit better.
And I also just wanted to let you all know as well that we have Naomi Carranza here today, who's also the outreach coordinator that's funded through this grant. So if there's any additional questions on outreach and education program, Naomi can also weigh in and provide a little perspective on that. And we're also really excited to have Anthony Singh here today, who's not directly funded by the grant, but is again one of our outreach and education interns that is supported this work.
Well, thank you, Kai, for the presentation. It's always great to hear about all the good work that's being done at the Methodist Community Garden. And thank you for sharing all of that. Are there any questions or feedback from directors? All right, I'm not seeing any hands. Maybe we'll go to public comment. First, I see in the chat, Ash concurred, good idea for more seating areas in the garden. I too think that's a cool idea. Is there any public comment on this item? Feel free to hit the raise your hand button or put something in the chat. I see a hand from Ash, go ahead.
Hi, what a great presentation and thanks for all the work you're doing. I'd love to meet you sometime. I do some other gardens and help with the food forest at Estero Park. I'd love to meet you or come and eat a snack at the Methodist Garden all the time. And I bring my compost there. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for everything you're doing. And I love to see that you put some native plants too and companion planting. And I know Katie knows all about permaculture and is probably giving you some great advice. And you're probably learning about that too. So yeah, just thank you. Okay, check.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying the garden. I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you for that, Ash. Next, I see Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's really great to see. Really love the garden. I used to live like very close to it, so I just bring me joy, honestly, especially last year, amidst like when COVID first happened. It would just bring me joy to see it and it flourish. And so my question, with please all of the love and intention behind this question is, I feel like compared to about a year ago when I was living very close to it, it's a little bit less voluminous. There's like a little bit less produce than there was last year. Can you like speak to that? Was that an intentional choice? Because like to me and the very limited knowledge I have about gardening is spring is the season for like stuff to be there. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that and if there's a difference in like growth patterns or planting or what changed basically.
Yeah, so well, a big part of that is that this is my first time managing such a large space. So a large part of this year was me adapting to just taking care of such a large area. But also right now, we spent a good amount of our funds recently just getting some materials for new raised beds, because one of the biggest issues we have at the garden is like the gophers. I think a majority of my time, not a majority of my time, a good amount of my time is spent building wire cages to protect the plants that go directly into the soil from the gopher. I've had issues with him just eating my stuff, and it's just been a constant battle. So one of the main areas that gets the most sun right now is left open as I'm waiting for the raised bed materials to come. They should be here actually on Monday. So hopefully I could get that in as soon as possible and get some more stuff in the ground. But yeah, it's been an adaptation process and just trying to get things going,
I'd also note just a little bit of addition to that, though we were able to continue our volunteer program this year, and we're able to bring in 50 different volunteers. To compare that to last year, we had several hundred volunteers come through the garden last year. And so we haven't been able to do large volunteer days because of COVID. So we can only do solo volunteer programs where it's much more distance and we just have one volunteer at a time. And so that has slowed some of the bigger projects that we would have been doing.
Awesome. Thank you to both of you. Appreciate it.
Any other comments from members of the public? I'm not seeing any, so I'll take it back to the board for any board discussion. Director Deschler, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I did. I had a hand up earlier, but I realized I was off camera and I just thought you were ignoring me. But anyways, I wanted just to say, Kaya and Katie, thank you for your presentation. I am a novice gardener, which I took up last year, and I have a little plot and it's so overwhelming and I can't imagine. And when Katie, when you said that you have literally like half the volunteers, it makes so much sense because it's such a big job. But I just think it's just so lovely to have a community garden in the neighborhood. I just think it's can be such a nurturing experience for people to be able to grow their own food and be part of nature in that way. And I love it. And I don't know if you talked about if there are any youth programs that are involved with the gardens, but I may have missed that. But I also could think that would be a really lovely thing to incorporate youth in the project. So I just want to thank you for all your work you're doing.
I'll weigh in on that one, mostly because this will predate some of our current intern groups. So we do actually do a lot of youth engagement pre-COVID, and we will as soon as COVID as soon as we get past COVID here. We have worked very extensively with the St. George's Youth Center and offered several workshops and garden tours to the St. George's Youth Center last academic year. We had to stop that with COVID because they're not doing tours or workshops with guest presenters right now. So we haven't been able to do it this year. But as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted, we would like to go back to doing partnerships with them. With that, we sometimes would just have them come over and have kind of recreational playtime in the garden, which was really fun because you could have the youth go around the garden, find the bugs and find the lizards and interact with the garden kind of at their own pace. We did some more structured workshops with them. We also actually, the pumpkin patch that we had last year was started by the St. George's Youth Center youth. And so sometimes we've also been able to do some projects where they've gotten to plant things and then see them grow and then get to harvest. And so that real close proximity with the youth center has been really wonderful. Also, this garden is a part of the Edible Campus Program Network. And through that, we also partner with the Orphalia Family Children's Center. And in normal times, we'll do about 7 workshops a month with them. We had very right before COVID, we had made an arrangement with Ivy Youth Projects to work with their early education program out at West Campus and have them come out to our student farm, and also had done some work with Ivy Elementary School, again, with some tours and coming over and getting to see their garden and then having them come over and get to see the college student garden. And that was some really neat programming as well. We also work on all ages. So we go from early childhood education up through high school, all the way up to seniors. So we another partnership that we had developed right before COVID was with Friendship Manor, and they were going to do garden walking tours to encourage exercise of their members and also get them out visiting both the Methodist Garden and the St. Michael's Garden. Again, that went on pause because of COVID, but we hope to bring those programs back in the next few months here.
Very impressive.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Director Bertrand.
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to praise the great work that's taking place by this program. Kai, Noemi, Anthony, Katie, you're all doing a great job. One of my favorite aspects of this program is how it can really do placemaking and transform a space where the grounds that this community garden is on before this didn't really have anything going on there landscape wise, and it was underutilized, undeveloped part of their property. Maybe they want a garden over there, or some other locations as well. But just one thing to maybe look into, see if you have any leads there. And I guess my question is for Noemi, if you have anything you want to tell us about the outreach that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. So I primarily am focused more on like the virtual outreach stuff. I'm not so much as involved with like the actual maintenance of the garden, but basically what I've done since I've been working as an outreach coordinator is, excuse me, kind of figuring out topics to give workshops on. So what we've done for the past 3 quarters is we've kind of tried having like one-off workshops wherein we'll have a virtual presentation via Zoom and maybe like some sort of demonstration for primarily UCSB students to sign up for. So then that way we can like educate them on some sort of like introductory gardening topic that, you know, we'll provide a space for people, for students to ask questions, and you know, with other students who are also maybe not so knowledgeable on like a certain topic. But what we've done the past 2 quarters, which has worked really well, and what seems to have worked really well for us, what I have like also really enjoyed doing as an outreach coordinator, is doing workshop series, which Kai had mentioned earlier. So the way that we structure it is we'll choose like a topic, whether that's like intro to indoor gardening, intro to outdoor gardening, or food justice, as was mentioned. And we'll spend the 6 weeks just sort of figuring out, outlining what topics to cover, how to best present it in a way that's really easy to understand for beginners, unless it's like an advanced series. But we really try to be very friendly to people, participants who aren't so aware of like vocabulary and all of that stuff. And this past quarter, we tried also opening it up to not only UCSB students, but community members as well, especially since I operate out of like the Methodist garden. And so we wanted to try to include members of the congregation as well as any other people who are involved in Isla Vista as a whole. And so we really tried to be very conscious as well of how access to food is a huge factor in why we even want to have these sort of workshops. We really tried to have a focus on food choice and allowing our participants to have an idea of like the bigger picture of why gardening is so important and why community gardens are so important, especially in a time where everything is so virtual. Having a sense of community and having a sense of, you know, still having some attachment to like nature and our own food, how important that is. And that's something we really try to stress in our workshops and all of that. I hope that wasn't too wordy. I hope I answered your question. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the information.
And Ethan, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in on 2 other points really quickly related to what you had brought up. One on a follow-up to Noemi's comments, I'll just note that also when we do in-person workshops, we offer, we can do Spanish translation, and we can do bilingual teaching. About half of our garden educators speak Spanish, and so that's a service that we can also offer as well. Haven't been able to utilize that as much with the virtual workshops this year, but I will hope to be able to do that as we go into this coming year. The other thing I just wanted to note on the spaces, I love the idea of thinking about vacant lot spaces, and there's some actually really interesting best practices that have been utilized in other parts of California with mobile raised beds that you can actually sort of move in and out of vacant lots, and some really interesting sort of property agreements where land will be used, but sort of very explicitly only for a short period of time. It definitely challenges some of our concepts of how we do gardens, because we can't do them anywhere near the same way. We usually are very land-based and really thinking about how do we invest in our soil. So we have to think in a more ephemeral way, but there are some really neat models for that. The other thing that we started before COVID was we launched an interfaith collaborative around food security and gardening, and had several different faith communities that were very excited about expanding food security and gardening projects throughout Isla Vista. And so we suspect that some of the locations that we'll be able to identify in this coming year for additional gardens will be faith-based in the same way that say the St. Michael's and the Methodist Garden are. And we think there's some real great land opportunities there where we can get some long-term commitments to land as well. So that's another avenue that we're looking at. And it's been really interesting and exciting to do that work because it's also creating cross conversations between different cultures and different faith communities in ways that's also, I think, very healing for our community.
Thank you for those comments to our team. This presentation has been really informative for me as a somewhat amateur gardener during quarantine. My mind is blown by your green thumbs and your ability to make that space a space that's continuously growing and getting better and better by the day. I know there's a lot in store for next year. I too am very interested in things that we can do to expand in terms of sites, and I know it's something you're thinking about. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this next year brings. So thank you to the team, Noemi, Anthony, and Kai for all your work on this.
You guys.
Any other comments from board members? Okay, with that, I think we're going to close this item. Thank you for the presenters for this presentation, and we look forward to our continued partnership. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a recess. We're going to take a recess for 5 minutes. We'll be back at 8:41 p.m. All right. Hi, everyone. We'll give everyone a second to get back on. All right. We're going to call this meeting back to order. And the next item is the Public Works budget discussion to give input on the Public Works budget.
Great. Let me get my screen shared. A second. All right. We had our finance committee meeting yesterday, and we talked about different aspects of our budget, one of them being our public works. And we discussed the three sections of the public works budget, the Isla Vista Beautiful, infrastructure, and public art. For Isla Vista Beautiful, we talked about, well, first we talked about the adjusted budget for 2020, 2021. I mentioned this again, it was incorrect, or it was too early of an estimate before we knew the real cost for this year. And so the estimated actuals are going to be above the adjusted budget because of that. That said, we did talk about that to expand this budget, we would look into having more available hours for work for the employees that we currently have, which are 3. Expand the number of employees if that's possible, if they can manage the hiring process and finding a good candidate. So having more hours and for more people, just so that we don't add more people but keep the same hours. Pay of the coordinator, looking into adjusting that in the budget, since in the current contract it's the same as the workers. So looking at right sizing that. Investing in marketing, since the program doesn't have a dedicated marketing or advertising budget, and that was a priority for the board at the last report. And then whatever the power washing budget expansion that we have discussed already and are working towards getting a report to you in about a month, whatever that looks like, making that as part of the budget. So Isla Vista Beautiful, we won't have a final budget for 2020 or 2021, 2022 until after July 1st. It's one of the reasons we're approving the final budget in August instead of June this year. So that's one area. I guess since that's a lot, I'd like to pause here and see if there's any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Cool. The next one was the program 7002, which is infrastructure, lighting, sidewalks, street trees, and gutters. The committee talked about putting, we've always put $50,000 in here, and it's been utilized. It hasn't been spent, but it's been utilized in different ways, like as a way to leverage the county putting in more lighting in Isla Vista with the taxes that IV residents already pay into CSA 31. But the committee talked about moving this to 0 and then funding the new program development line item, which we did not fund this year. That was 0 this year. And so that we have that flexibility of what kind of project, new program that we fund. So that was the discussion there. So since there is no direct project ahead of us lighting wise, we said let's put it in the more general pot of money, new program development. And then the public art, which is.
Could I ask a question about that?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, so it's not my forte, so I'll just put that out there. Budget stuff at 8:45 at night, not good for me, but whatever. We heard a lot in the recent meeting. I think Catherine was it on the it was the Ethan and Catherine meeting that you all had to talk about nightlife and that kind of thing, and it seemed like a lot of people brought up lighting. So I just want to understand if the lighting is if it's going to be zeroed out in this category, is it going to another category? I didn't understand what you were just saying.
Yeah, the idea is that we would put money, we did not allocate any yet, but we would put money into the new program development line item or program instead. so that we could use that for, if there was a lighting project, it could be used. And if there wasn't a direct lighting project, then it could be used for, another new initiative.
Okay, got it.
I don't know if anyone else from the committee wants to chime in. That's like the technical side of it.
Yeah, I can just add, as Jonathan, you mentioned that money in the past was used for us to leverage that money that was in our budget with CSA 31. And because CSA 31, which is the county agency that provides lighting to Isla Vista, had such a large fund balance of over $200,000, they were able to pay for it all from the county funds. And so we did not end up having to spend Isla Vista dollars on it.
And then next is public art. The committee talked about keeping this 5,000 pool of money at status quo, but the goal would be to let's try to get one mural done, and in collaboration with the IVRPD, which is doing a mural project in the parks right now. So we said we'll keep it at 5, but let's try to get let's just try to get one done with this funding. So that's public works. The parking is also on the same attachment. So I don't know if we want to just go into that one and discuss both together or discuss them separate.
Let's bring it to the board if there's any questions or comments on art, lighting, beautification. We'll all just throw one thing out here about the Isla Vista beautification or beautiful program, which is that I think this continues to be one of our most popular programs, and it continues to be a program that has immense need for it. I think we haven't had the presentation at our full board of our budget survey responses, but I went through and read everything and did my own little tallying up of everything. And the number one concern was street cleanliness and trash in our community. And that's something that Isla Vista Beautiful, I think, has done an excellent job of helping to remedy, as well as all of the other things that it helps out with. So I think the expansion is very necessary and will be a great use of our tax dollars. All right, not seeing any other comments from the board. Then with that, well, actually, you know what? If we're going to move to the next item, I should take public comment first. So any public comment on the public works budget? Raise your hand or put something in the chat. Okay, seeing none, back to the board. If there's nothing else from the board, then we can move to the next one, which is the parking budget discussion.
Great, easy. We just scroll up. I think you did get a comment in the chat. Oh, never mind. That was for me. So the parking discussions. The first one is the parking study. So this has been a sub-program in our budget since 1819, the first full one we did. We discussed, the finance committee discussed keeping this at 25,000, and I'm gonna jump to the 6,003, which is the STEP grant. So the cost of the STEP grant in our budget for 21-22 is gonna be $114,000 approximately. And that includes the money for the community engagement director that we're getting funded, all the other community engagement work that we do, like hiring the local organizations, the demonstration projects, so, the other administrative parts of the grant, and the needs assessment and existing conditions report. So with that, I mean, with the fact that only about 40,000 this next year will be spent on the existing conditions report, and it's meant to encapsulate everything beyond parking as well as parking. We did talk about keeping this at the 25,000, the parking study, so that it could go hand in hand with the STEP grant this fall, as they can both happen at the same time with the same consultant to make things more efficient and give us a better result, but not stress the grant too much on parking, which includes parking, but is not only focused on parking. So that's the 25,000 there. And then, so that's 25,000 for our study, 114,000 as a grant from STEP. And again, that number will get corrected to be maybe around 10,000 less, or maybe more like 100,000 here and other parts of the budget. And then the last thing is the parking alternatives promotion, which we've had in the past is like a $3,000 to promote other ways people can, transport themselves besides using a car. But we said, let's put that at 0 this year because the STEP grant's already going to do all that in the demonstration projects starting in the spring. So that has a healthy, even bigger funding source to do that kind of work next year. So we said we'll put this at 0 for now.
Okay, any questions, comments, or feedback from the board? All right, not seeing any. I will just add to that I think this is a worthy investment to make, and I'm really excited because it's lining up so well with our STEP grant process, where we have regional stakeholders at the table with MTD and others, with the county and UCSB as well. And we're going to need to continue that in order to make this parking study be as good as it can possibly be, and do it in a way that isn't just focused so narrowly on cars, but also encapsulates every mode of transportation in the community. So I think it's a worthy investment. Okay, not seeing any others. Open up public comments. Any public comments on this item? I see a hand from Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, I'm sorry if I'm asking you to repeat things, but I don't think I still fully understand the parking study. Like, is it a required precursor to the STEP grant? And I think it was also mentioned like this was done before in 2018-19. I'm just wondering if it could be clarified more, because I missed also this portion of the discussion at the finance committee yesterday.
Yeah, so we've always budgeted to do a parking study because we've always believed that the parking studies that have been done in Isla Vista are incorrect, and that this parking study would be qualitative and locally focused. That has always been a part of our budget. We've never acted on it for many reasons, but now that the STEP grant is happening, what the finance committee discussed doing yesterday was to keep this as part of our budget and act on it in conjunction with the STEP grant, so that the STEP grant can be the money from that can be used to study more than just parking, but including parking, and what we put in to it will be to supplement what the STEP grant is studying, so that when it does make recommendations in 2 years, it is making them based on the most full amount of data, especially in regards to parking, which is a big quagmire in Isla Vista. So it might not be able to do all the necessary study, qualitative and quantitative, that we have discussed wanting out of a parking study. So our contribution would be, the state's giving us this money to do the study, and we will supplement it to make it stronger.
And thank you for that, by the way. And so is this money that has been held over from previous budgets? Is it just like a number that has never been used, or is this or was that money in previous years allotted to other things, and now it is being re-allotted to the parking study?
It's never been spent. Unspent fund balance goes into our undesignated or designated reserves.
Got it. And then my last question is, where does the 25,000 number actually come from? Is this an estimate of what a parking study would cost? Does this have to do with the STEP grant, funding? Could you where does that actual number come from?
We had put in a number back in 2018-19. I think we had put 35 or 30,000, and that was based on what we thought then a study would cost, and we reduced it to 25,000 last year, or year prior. I think it's been 3 budget years we've had this, and we left it there, and so we left it at 25. So it is not a quote or anything we've received before. It's, you know, we thought it was going to be in the 30,000 range, reduced our budget to 25 when we hadn't acted on it yet, and now we're keeping it at 25 because it's now a supplemental. It's not standing on its own.
Got it. And there's no reason to believe that that number has changed radically within like the industry of people who do parking studies, right?
We will, you know, when we get closer, we'll do our due diligence on that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Are there any other public comments on parking budget? All right, I'm not seeing any hands or anything in chat, so I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion on this from or input from the board? All right, well, seeing none, I'll just second something that Jonathan mentioned, which is that parking has been studied in Isla Vista before, I think 3 times in this century. And obviously all of that data is, number one, very outdated. And number two, I don't think it was ever wholly adequate from having looked at it myself and from heard so much community input that at the time it was not adequate to be able to make decisions on. So this is a great opportunity now that we can have maybe some economies of scale. Now that we'll have a consultant, we have an outreach process in place that we can really have something really get to work on this important issue. I see a hand from Marcos.
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with like this parking study idea, and I'm wondering, like, first of all, what are some basic questions that are just like asked in a parking study? And like a big one that I think about as a 6-8 resident is people who live in their parking spot, and those types of issues, and like how this kind of like makes it a much more 3-dimensional issue on the topic of houselessness.
Yeah, I can talk about what some of the past parking studies have tried to do, and you know, we will get to do it in our own way. We've never really had the discussion to say. I can't say what the CSD wants to do because we've never discussed it. But the past parking studies have done things like, well, the one I know most recently did things like it counted the number of cars in Isla Vista on the public streets, and then they went out and tried to measure the curbs to see how many spots were available out there. And the great thing about it, or the not so great thing about it, is that they did this in like June, in the end of June, when it didn't even match reality of the situation. So that's what has been done. I mean, some of the criticisms have been, again, like it was not locally administered or advised. So whatever study was being done, again, and I think that study was done towards the creation of a parking permit program for the IV master plan to be approved. Like this is in the early 2010s. It was what the county was doing. So that's what they did. It was a, you know, there were 3 done, or 2 or 3 done, and not really focused on counting spots on the public streets and counting cars. And so, and also maybe making some determinations of, okay, you could have this many permits in this area, or doing it this way. So that's what the study did last. And, you know, one thing it didn't do, for example, too, is it didn't count the number of private parking spots that exist and are available in Isla Vista, for example. So there's several criticisms. I'm sure others can expand more on the past parking studies. You know, Jay was very around for it.
I definitely have a lot I could say on parking studies, what we would need out of a parking study. I'm just not certain what is exactly appropriate for our discussion today. So.
Yeah, and we don't have to get too far into it today since we're just talking about budget, but I think that's a good synopsis is exactly what you said, Jonathan, what you said to Marcos. We can't just have a quantitative element to a study. We can't just count and get data and numbers. It needs to be qualitative when we need to have survey questions that are well administered that we can make decisions from about who it is that's parking in Isla Vista, about why they're parking in Isla Vista, about what we can do to make the system better, considerations like that. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, well, this has been a good discussion and good input on both these budget items. I know that we will take it back as a finance committee and you'll see it fully reflected in the preliminary budget once it gets released. And Jonathan, can you, just for the public's benefit, mention some of the dates in our budget process and how that's moving forward?
Yes, so the budget moving forward is the finance committee is going to meet again on the third Monday of June, which I believe is the 14th off the top of my head. And that at that meeting, the committee will discuss the final parts of the budget that haven't been discussed specifically yet in its committee setting. And it'll discuss the preliminary budget as a whole and what will be recommended to the board. And then the last meeting in June for the board on June 22nd will include approval of the preliminary budget. And I think the committee will talk about it again in June, but we had set August 24th as the date to approve the final budget. So we'll do the proper noticing for that and as the time comes. But June 22nd and August 24th are the big dates where the budget preliminary and final budgets will be discussed by the board. And June 14th is the finance committee meeting where the final discussions will be made to have the preliminary budget constructed.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And we encourage those that are interested to participate in those meetings or provide us feedback. I know those of us on the finance committee, myself, Ethan and Bob are always happy to receive input and welcome it. Okay, next we're going to move to item 4.6, COVID-19 response. And I know we have some good news on that front to share. I think we had a successful partnership this weekend with the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department to vaccinate Isla Vistans. Jonathan, if you want to give us an update on how that went.
Yes, I didn't get to be there during the actual clinic itself. I was there to help set up beforehand, but I met with the students who are hosting it at 750 Embarcadero Del Mar, and I talked with them a little bit after on yesterday. They said it was a great success. We had 120 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as a walk-up. We were able to switch from a 2-shot appointment system to the walk-up 1-shot, which was really important. And yeah, so that was our mobile vaccine clinic. I think we'd be interested in doing more and continuing to do more of these as the summer goes and as vaccination goals adjust. But it was a great one to get done. And we also had we recorded a session with the Mighty and Vax Coalition and the neighborhood clinics and public health about vaccines that I recorded it on our Zoom, and we're gonna get it out for distribution. And our interns also met with Santa Barbara County Behavioral Wellness to help them come up with ideas and brainstorm ways to promote vaccination in the community, especially in Isla Vista and for students and young people. So they were well received there, and some ideas came out of there. One being, can there be an event for vaccinated people sometime this summer in Isla Vista? So that was one of the things that came out of there. But I'll be meeting more with behavioral wellness to see what they want to do for vaccine promotion campaigns.
Excellent. That is great to hear. Director Geis, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hey, Jonathan, were they able to, in the walk-up clinic setting with no appointments, did they distribute all 120, all the doses? Or
I believe so. I haven't gotten the final word on the number that did get distributed, but what I heard was that it was busy, and
cool.
it was successful, is what I heard from the people who were there. So, but not from the county public health. I haven't heard a exact number yet.
Director Flaherty, I saw your hand.
I just have a comment. I just think it's so exciting that we could have a vaccination mobile clinic here in Isla Vista, and especially one that really reduces any costs that may come with receiving a vaccine. So accessibility like travel, it was in Isla Vista, so you can easily walk there. And then especially with the one shot, you don't have to remember to go to your second appointment, or maybe, you wait long enough and you're like, oh, do I really need my second shot? So I think that having one shot is just like incredible. And I'm just really excited and have a lot of hope for our community. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
Well, I'll echo those comments. Very excited to see the developments, and want to really give a special shout out to the UCSB Panhellenic and Interfraternity Councils for being great partners in helping host this clinic, and the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department, who really have just been doing heroic work for a year and a half now. And it's really great to just be able to see our friends and neighbors get vaccinated, and more to come, hopefully. Our community is very large, and I know something that's been on my mind, especially recently, is how we can try and help bring that same level of accessibility that we saw this weekend to some of our populations that may be a little bit more vaccine hesitant, as well as bringing it to some of our populations that are traditionally underserved. And so I'm optimistic and hopeful that we can continue this great partnership. I see a comment from Mark that as of 3 hours ago, there's only one active COVID-19 case in Isla Vista at this time, 0 new today. I think that's incredible. I mean, I'm speechless. It speaks for itself that our community members are heeding the call to get vaccinated, which is so great. And I know myself and Director Flaherty have had a chance to participate in a new publicity campaign that is going to be happening with commercial spots around the county to try and encourage our peers to get vaccinated under the message of, it's quick, it's easy, it's accessible, and it's super necessary for us to be able to fully get back to normal, for us to be able to have a fun summer where we can gather in large groups. We need everyone to get vaccinated. So but very happy with the trajectory that everything is going on that front. And thank you to our staff for really throughout this time going above and beyond the call of duty that we have here as a small special district to make this a priority for our community. I mean, it's just so important. And I really want to thank you, Jonathan, and Deborah as well, for all the work that you've done on this front. Okay, seeing no other discussion, is there any public comment? Oh, sorry, Kirsten, go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment that I was in a meeting with Dr. Von de Reynoso last week, and she made a comment that that her colleagues around the state were concerned that the higher education community wasn't getting vaccinated at very high rates. But of course, UCSB, and our community, we always do things so well, voting, engagement. And and that UCSB and the surrounding community is like up to about 70%, where the state average was around 60% higher education community. So, you know, UCSB and Isla Vista are doing well with vaccination. And she was very pleased. She was saying like she had bragging rights.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Dr. Doronoso has a lot to brag about because she's done such an excellent job leading our county through this crisis. So much love to her and her team. Any public comments on COVID-19? Okay, and with that, we're going to close this item and we'll move along. So the next item on our agenda was going to be closed section, but we're going to postpone that item to our next meeting, which is June 8th, 2021, at which time we will conduct the general manager annual performance and salary review. And for now, we are going to move directly to item 6, which will be reports from board members. Any board members have reports? Director Freeman.
I have been doing tests of some new off-the-shelf equipment that the district will be able to purchase for usage of hybrid meetings, and it's working very well, including I succeeded in doing an outdoor watch party for a Parks District meeting, and that actually worked rather well. So, yeah.
Director Deschler.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I went to the meeting with Catherine, I think Marcos and Ethan had last week, I believe, whenever it was, about the arts and nightlife that was done with IVRPD. And I just wanted to say to you guys, you did such a great job. I love the way you structured the meeting. I love the questions that you asked. I love the engagement. I just thought you organized it really well, and I was so pleased. I love the thoughtful commentary from the community, and I just thought you ran a really great meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Director Bertrand.
Yes, well, thank you, Director Deschler, for those comments. It was a really great meeting. Glad to have the partnership with the Park District, and we were really blown away by the participation, especially this being our first meeting. I know I'm someone who, as I'm preparing for a meeting, I always wonder, will people show up? And luckily, people did show up in mass, so that was great. And on top of the folks who were there, there were also people who are continuing to participate in the survey that we have to provide feedback offline as well. And it's just the start of our conversation. So really excited for next steps.
Excellent. Thank you for that update, everyone. I also echo, I was in attendance as a non-participant and very much enjoyed the presentation and the discussion. The only update that I want to share is that when we had a presentation from the Santa Barbara County community, I'm sorry, I always forget the name of their department, Community Services Department, about homelessness in our community. They mentioned the Elected Leaders Forum, and I was happy to attend that forum this past week, where there was a great discussion about a number of items, one of which was encampment response policy. And the goal that the forum set to try and come up with a uniform encampment response policy that all jurisdictions in the county will follow in order to respond in a way that is equitable and that addresses the emerging needs. And so myself and Supervisor Hartman are both on this committee, and I will just be looking forward if community members have input or want to talk about those things. I'm very happy to do so. I think this is an important issue. Director Flaherty.
I just have a quick report too. I guess you already alluded to it, but Spencer and I participated in an ad that's going to be for public health. So we're super excited about that, and excited to see how those turn out so we can share it with everyone and maintain momentum for getting people vaccinated. And then another report, you may have seen myself and Spencer and Ethan released a statement on May 23rd, so 2 days ago, about an incident that occurred late Friday and early Saturday, the 21st and 22nd, on the 600 block of Sueño. And that has received some coverage by local news sources. And we mentioned how there wasn't a timely notification when this occurred. And then we also included resources to CAPS and then SBCC Student Health and Wellness and the Community Wellness team as well. So that was for us to make a statement on it. We hadn't seen much else. And yeah, I just wanted to report that as well, since you may have seen it.
Thank you for sharing, Catherine. And I appreciate you bringing it up. I am hoping that we can agendize this item for further discussion in the future, because I think it is an incredibly important issue and it deserves community attention. Director Deschler.
Yeah, I was just going to basically say the same thing that you just said, Spencer. I think there would be a lot of value in understanding the process of timely notification, what goes into it by the sheriff's office. And I think it also would be of value, because I see Corporal Burns on here, Ariel here. I think there would be value in the community understanding the clarity notification, because they are different. And sometimes there is confusion of what is a clarity notification, which is a process that UCSB has to go through with regard to receiving federal education funds, and what the timely notification is by the Sheriff's Department. So I hope that can be a discussion, because I think the community needs to hear both those processes and understand them.
Great points. And Director Flaherty.
Yeah, and sorry, I forgot to mention what happened to, just really briefly. There was an assault as well as individual gunshots fired on Sueño. So just in case anyone wasn't aware of that, that happened Friday and Saturday, just to also say that.
Yeah, thank you for describing that. And Director Bertrand, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, for bringing this up. And one thing I'll just add too, for context, really the impetus of this is all three of us were receiving frantic calls and text messages on Friday night about there's someone shooting a gun in Isla Vista, and no one had answers. And then more than one day passed and there was no information put out there. So we really just found it important to release the limited information we had so that Isla Vista residents had some answers. So looking forward to a further discussion.
Thank you for that, Director Bertrand. I think you put it very well. And I see we do have a hand up. I also want to just defer to what our council has told us, that we can't talk too much about items that are not on our agenda. But I appreciate your willingness to speak with us about this, Corporal Bornay, and would encourage folks to follow up with you offline. Okay, the next item is report from standing and ad hoc committees. Any committee reports? I think we've covered both of them. Finance Committee, we had our work product here tonight, and the Arts, Culture, and Nightlife Committee also, I think, spoke about their great forum. Okay, next is a report from District Council.
Thank you, President Brandt. Two quick issues. I've been keeping you updated as best as I can on when we might anticipate that the governor is going to rescind his executive orders that allows us to meet remotely and participate remotely. Because the Brown Act normally requires in-person meetings, or if you have a teleconference, participation by other members of the board. There are certain noticing requirements that have to be met. The statewide associations for a number of public agencies, including the League of California Cities, the California Association of Counties, the Special Districts Association, the Association of Water Districts, et cetera, approximately 16 or 17 different statewide associations for public agencies wrote a letter to the governor about 10 days ago asking for essentially a 30-day acclimation period for whenever it is that the governor rescinds those orders in 25 and in 29, that there be a 30-day period for agencies to plan on a return to having those in-person meetings. It's a pretty reasonable request. It's certainly consistent with what we believe would happen given the governor's past actions in trying to accommodate the large number of public agencies in California. We have 482 cities, we have 58 counties, and we have approximately 1,600 special districts. So that's a lot of public agencies that have gone from doing everything remotely and looking at putting resources towards having in-person meetings and potentially having some type of a remote presence as well. No additional updates at this point on any of those bills other than what I've reported before. We'll keep watching to see if any of those get any additional traction. We're basically planning on the governor keeping to what he scheduled before about June 15th as kind of the reopening. So we expect the executive orders to be rescinded anywhere around that area, which would put the middle of July as kind of the return to normal deadline if he adopts the 30-day break-in period that the state associations have requested. And then the second item is just a reminder to make sure that you check for your AB 1234 and your sexual harassment avoidance training compliance. Those are 2-year requirements. Some members of the board may get that through your position, but just to make sure, a general reminder to keep up on that. That's generally speaking, it's every 2 years that you have to go through that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Ross. Director Dessler, I see you had a question.
Yeah, what is 1234?
AB 1234 is ethics training. It's a 2-hour requirement, and you may have already gone through that with your position at UCSB. And if you haven't, okay, very good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I just never heard to as referred to. Yes, we do that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thank you for the update on reopening, Ross. I know that it's on our minds. Me, Jay, and Jonathan have been speaking about going and testing Jay's awesome technology, and even got a sneak preview of how it would work when he tested it out last week. So I am certainly hopeful that everything will work out. We'll be able to be ahead of the curve, because it certainly looks like our health conditions are making it so that that may be allowable, which is just great news.
Yes, and I think I mentioned this before, but if not, I'm totally vaccinated as of May 5th, so I'm ready to return whenever the board is.
To be clear, the stuff we've used in the past has been, quote, Jay's awesome technology, unquote, but this is just an off-the-shelf piece of hardware that is just something that I evaluated and have been testing. So, and I received a mention that you need a light ring. It's like, well, I actually have a lot of lights, they just don't turn on. So.
Well, your testing is what makes it happen. So don't be shy about it. Really appreciate what you're doing. Okay, next we have report from General Manager.
Great. Well, I've got a bit of a report just to keep you updated on what's going on. The Compost Collective, we're hiring for the Dirt Rider positions and the Program Manager position. So please spread the word on that. And there's also about to launch on Monday, the Food on Wheels food donation program. So it's part of the move out. People can donate their food that they might be throwing out otherwise to Food on Wheels. It's a partnership with AS and Compost Collective. So please, we'll post that on our social media so please share it if you see it. Our Ivy Beautiful, exciting news. Our new posters are in that we designed as a way to better market the program. So they're going to start getting distributed around town now. And I think I've showed them before, but they kind of include like a little guide of how to submit a request and what you can submit requests for, and pictures of our staff. So it's really nice. And just an overview of the last couple weeks of operations. their main issue they've been dealing with is obstructions on the sidewalk, bird scooters, and then graffiti and trash. So those are the top three issues, but bird scooters and the sidewalks is number one by far, more than the other two combined in the top three. Rental housing mediation program. Deborah is working on the annual report for you all to consider at the next board meeting. So that'll be, that's the next one in the series of annual reports for programs. And we're preparing there for the end of year issues that always come up with deposits. 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, the roof is complete. Deborah went on a walkthrough, I think on Friday of last week. And I think she shared with me that it was around a $170,000 job to get that done successfully. UCPD contracts were, we discussed meeting at the end of this week following today's presentation. So we're moving forward on getting those to you back soon. Let's see. Alternative response. We haven't heard back yet on scheduling it for June 8th for the SNAP program from the city of San Luis Obispo. We hope we'll be able to talk with them again and get that scheduled, but we haven't heard back anything yet. So I'll let you all know what happens, but we're hoping that happens. LAFCO MSR, we actually got really good reviews on our submission quality so far, and we have actually updates to make that we got more information from UCPD, and LAFCO said they'll send us questions, but none at the moment. Retreat follow-up and other staffing related issues. Deborah's working on the onboarding and orientation for new hires, since we're going to have a lot of new hires in the next couple months. So we're getting that ready. And we're also working on the new office configuration and people coming back to the office to work as an option. It's a lot. It's a lot. And the needs, like equipment and furniture and technology. So we hope to have something to discuss at the next meeting so we can get your input on how you're thinking this could work, and budget and scale, how we can make it feasible. So to have all many more employees working in our building, in our offices. So that's an upcoming issue. The finance committee, we mentioned it, the public input is complete. You can check all that on the finance committee agenda, or I'll send it to you, but the interns worked on a summary analysis and there's all the raw data. So you can read all the 100 responses yourself, or there's a summary of it too. The Public Records Act, I'm supposed to report to you all the amount, what we get, and there were another few Public Record Act requests since the last meeting on the Compost Collective related to that. Move out, that's something that's coming out. We just got the notice on the new rules and regulations and details for move out this year. So we're going to start getting that out there. The move out page on our website, which we leave up all year. I think we would just rename it How to Dispose of Your Waste when it's not June, but it's one of the most visited pages on our website over the year. So we're going to update it and get it promoted again. And finally, the community engagement director, hiring is going really well. I think we have over 10 applicants already, very good candidates that I'm excited by. And we're posted all across the major job boards, and Deborah's worked on getting community channels, like making sure community groups and people know about the job. So we are well advertised and getting a very strong response. I think we get like 2 or 3 applications a day. So I'm excited by it. And some upcoming board issues too. The planning firms report, headway is being made on that. So in June, we'll hopefully get that to you to review of different options of how we can move forward there. The library, I think I might have mentioned this last meeting, but just to make sure, the library is, I believe the library is coming to present next meeting on June 8th on their operations. Another thing to start thinking about as we get closer to, after June 15th and where our community programs in the community room and center go. I know we talked a lot about one job, but I think it's soon to start talking about the next job, which is the community center director replacement, and how we adjust that. So that's another one that's coming up. So that's the report. Is kind of a bigger one this time, but there's a lot going on this past couple weeks.
All right. Thank you for that report, Jonathan. Any questions from directors? Director Deschler.
I wanted to ask a question. When we see a lot of scooters in the right of way, does that information get reported to the County Public Works Department?
Yeah, so we are working on getting them a full report of how much we've dealt with, because it's a more recent issue that we're dealing with in the last couple months. So we never used to have a process to send them, because the bird scooters went away as fast as they came almost. But now that it is becoming, we've noticed it's becoming a huge issue every month now for our workers. So we're gonna start. We're going to actually even make a new report issue that is just scooters, and then so that obstruction of public right of way is very broad, and then we will use that scooters tab to report to the county and make them aware. But we're going to send them all we have already, and then now have a better tracking system, because it's become really cumbersome.
Yeah, because because they negotiate the contracts, they have a process to enforce when there's obstructions of right of way.
Yeah.
I'll also add on that note, because I've been concerned with the obstructions as well. And Jonathan and I had a chance to meet with a company that is interested in bringing electric bike share to Isla Vista and UCSB, which is really cool. I've been a fan of electric bike share ever since I first rode electric bikes in Seattle. I think it's really cool technology. And I know that they're going through the process with the county and trying to make things happen. But with those bikes, one of the things that I really enjoyed about them is that they were docked bikes. So they would not just be as the hopper bikes were, or as the scooters are, dockless, which I know has presented a lot of challenges to folks. So just throwing that out there as a little teaser update, and we'll bring more updates if we have any. All right, any other questions for Jonathan? Okay, then with that, we'll conclude our meeting. The next meeting date is on June 8th, 2021. It'll be at 6 p.m. right here on Zoom. Is there any, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Made by Freeman, seconded by Deschler. Is there any public comment or discussion? All right, let's do roll call.
Dr. Brandt?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Deschler?
Yes.
Bertrand?
Yes.
Geis?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.